for whom the Quran is a sacred text. Supporting casts for the Jones stunt included New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who chose an annual iftar dinner at Gracie Mansion to cite the U.S. Constitution in support of this provocation. Likewise, for New York Times columnist Charles Blow, whose prominently placed op-ed on September the 11th urged that great American debates should not be tempered for terrorists. National security may, at long last, be catching on to how these complicit in these psyops use our guaranteed freedoms of speech, press, religion, etc. to undermine our freedom. It's no coincidence that those most concerned with domestic eavesdropping by national security are drawn from the same ranks as those complicit in this ongoing manipulation of public opinion. The high-profile nature of this latest 9/11 anniversary ensured that agent provocateurs would use the event to keep hate alive. The day prior, President Obama urged that Israel extend its temporary partial freeze on settlements for the sake of sustaining the peace talks. Meanwhile, Jewish Zionist Pamela Zeller sponsored a speech at Ground Zero by Dutch politician Geert Wilders, who likens the Quran to Mein Kampf. A staunch supporter of Israel, Wilders is known for his incendiary speeches with a strong anti-Islam theme. Geller, a disciple of Russian philosopher Ayn Rand, Alyssa Rosenbaum, advocates measures to stop Islamization of America. She emphasizes the role of Barack Obama in doing the bidding of Islamic overlords in what she calls the Obama administration's war on America. An outspoken Jewish Zionist, Geller urges that Israel give up nothing. A regular commentator on the Zionist-dominated media outlets, CNN, Fox News, The Washington Post, The New York Times, she insists that Israel should take back Gaza and secure Judea and Samaria, better known as the West Bank, the key area of contention on expansion of the settlements. Geller is also the driving force behind anti-Islam hate groups working to scuttle plans for an Islamic cultural center 2 blocks from the 9/11 site. Allied with others in the hate campaign, she was among the first in November 2009 to describe the shootings on Fort Hood, Texas, as a Muslim terror attack.
Keeping the anti-Semitism theme front and center remains essential to advance the hate-mongers narrative with the assistance of mainstream media. Thus, the Anti-Defamation League criticized the current cover of Time magazine for what ADL President Abe Foxman suggested was a portrayal of Israelis as more interested in making money than in striking a peace accord with the Palestinians. The article highlighted Israel's booming real estate market and the pleasure Israelis are taking in late summer vacations. Nevertheless, according to Foxman, the insidious subtext of Israeli Jews being obsessed with money echoes the age-old anti-Semitic falsehood that Jews care about money above any other interest, in this case achieving peace with the Palestinians. Foxman insisted that managing editor Richard Stengel issue an apology to readers both for the timing of the article and for calling up old anti-Semitic stereotypes about Jews and money. As if right on cue, the next day filmmaker Michael Moore jumped into the Islamic Cultural Center debate, arguing that the center should not be near the 911 site, but inside it, as a way for Muslims to recover their religion from Islamic extremists. In his branded controversial style, Moore could have left it at that. Instead, he used his assured media profile to relate an account of George Washington's wish to see Jews receive equal rights. From a PSYOPs perspective, the subject matter is secondary to the impressions left with the public. The embedding of imagery and emotion is the strategic purpose of much of what you see. For instance, Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf, speaking to ABC's This Week, said on September 12th that the controversy over the site of an Islamic cultural center has heightened concerns among Muslims of rising anti-Muslim sentiment, saying he felt there was growing Islamophobia in this country. That's a foreseeable result of creating widely shared impressions that foster and sustain widely shared beliefs that, in turn, are kept intact with emotional triggers. That's how the hate-monger narrative progresses in plain sight. When waging war in the shared field of consciousness, the most powerful weapon is often power of association. Michael Moore's film success shows how it's done. In his popular Fahrenheit 9/11, he deployed impressionistic weaponry to associate the war in Iraq with Bush oil. How was that done? He showed in film that one of the several dozen siblings of Osama bin Laden served on the board of advisors to the Carlyle Group, an investment banking firm in Washington, D.C. Also serving on that board was former President George H.W. Bush, the father of George W. Bush. Therefore, by the power of association, the war in Iraq was for Bush oil. Storylines don't need to be true, just plausible. The point of psyops is not reality, but credibility. Impressions gain the traction required to advance a storyline in plain sight. Consensus beliefs create and sustain a narrative in plain sight. Psyops succeed when they attract enough eyeballs to misdirect the public's attention in plain sight. Fahrenheit 9/11 was produced by Miramax, a Disney subsidiary. Miramax co-chairman Harvey Weinstein loudly claimed that Disney reneged on its promise to distribute Moore's film. Disney chief executive Michael Eisner objected just as loudly. The high-profile sparring between these two Hollywood titans dragged on for months in mainstream media. By the time the film was released, the interest generated by this dispute ensured that Moore's film opened on a record number of screens for a documentary. At virtually no cost, that public relations ploy helped ensure an international audience for a film that discredited not only the US, but also the office of the president. In its practical effect, the Moore film helped ensure there was virtually no mention of how key Zionist goals were advanced by this war in plain sight. Meanwhile, September 12 news reports highlighted the extradition to France from Egypt of a terrorist who apparently planned to bomb an Israel Defense Forces event in Paris. Noticeably absent were facts about the time frame of this threat, or even when the arrest was made. That account provided an opportunity for the chief of French intelligence to make a high-profile announcement that the risk of a terrorist attack on France has never been higher. This week, the French Senate is scheduled to vote a ban on wearing Islamic veils known as burqas, a vote certain to reinforce the clash of civilizations as the consensus narrative. Also on September 12th, the leader of Shin Bet announced in Tel Aviv, Hamas forces in Gaza and the West Bank are engaged in an effort to foil peace talks. Israel's domestic security chief told cabinet ministers, threats are due to increase in the near future as diplomatic developments occur. This isn't just an estimate, but is supported by real intelligence. Unmentioned in this volatile mix is the psychology of the hate-monger. The purveyors of hate routinely project onto their opponents both their own personality traits, hatred, and, as here, their anticipated agenda. This announcement was far more likely to mean that Shin Bet will stage provocations designed to make it appear that Hamas is the instigator of violence. For the Zionist agenda to continue in plain sight, peace must be avoided, no matter what the cost. Disruption of the peace process, in turn, must plausibly be the work of others. The hate-monger must appear to be hated. The aggressor must plausibly appear to be the victim. Thus the need to portray an anti-Semitic, a hater, those who document the dynamics of how hate-mongers induce hate in plain sight. Should we see a revival of the U.S. national security apparatus, we will also see a pushback against the right-wing extremist coalitions that have long ruled Israel. However, any resistance to the Zionist agenda runs the risk that Israel's masters of game theory warfare will collapse another government. That's how Tel Aviv responded when, in June 1963, President John F. Kennedy pressured David Ben-Gurion for inspections of Israel's nuclear facility at Dimona. This young president sought to ensure that the Zionists of that era did not start a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. He foresaw what we now see. Before JFK's strongly worded letter could be physically delivered, Ben-Gurion resigned, citing undisclosed personal reasons. By the time a replacement governing coalition was in place and fully functional, the Kennedy problem had been handled. In the parlance of national security, that's called an entropy strategy. Fast emerging circumstances suggest the likelihood of a similar strategy, particularly should there emerge any prospect of peace with the Palestinians. As Israeli Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman candidly puts it, peace is impossible. Not next year, and not for the next generation. Should Bibi pressure this fragile governing coalition for an extension of the temporary partial freeze on settlements, members of his nationalist government could withdraw, collapsing the government. Key members of the coalition signal their intentions on September 12th by announcing that any extensions of the freeze will end the Netanyahu government. On September 13th, 4 Likud party members threatened to withdraw budget support if the freeze is extended. That threat was issued as Netanyahu departed for peace talks in Sharm el-Sheikh with Palestinian leader and U.S. Secretary of State Clinton. The recurring possibility of governmental collapse has long given Tel Aviv leverage over peace talks sought by the U.S. That era may soon draw to a close if our national security apparatus is now guiding U.S. foreign policy. To date, our elected officials have proven themselves unable to navigate through the manipulation often deployed by Israel to stymie agreement on the terms of a peace accord. Tel Aviv knows the power that the perception of political vulnerability offers in negotiations. When the game theory dynamics of Israeli psyops are fully grasped, that leverage will quickly dissipate as negotiators realize they have long been manipulated. That makes the duplicity personal. The key barrier to realizations is the fast-fading belief among policymakers in the US and the EU that Israel is an ally and a friend rather than a sophisticated foe skilled at using deception to leverage its small numbers to great effect. Though collapse is one possible strategy, Bibi may instead be assassinated. The threads of a plausible storyline were laid on a September 9th article in Haaretz.com, where he was compared to French President Charles de Gaulle, against whom French nationalists staged numerous assassination attempts. Either approach would inject enough entropy into the peace process to sustain the Palestinian conflict and extend the occupation yet again. Either strategy would strengthen the hand of the hate-mongers as settlers build another 19,000 homes and U.S. legislators continue to pretend that the Zionist state is a victim of anti-Semitism rather than a serial agent provocateur.